Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets. Or you can subscribe to the channel, click that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Let's talk about this whole Billy Joe Saunders, Canelo Alvarez saga. First and foremost, I'll say this. A lot of people are talking about how, this is a duck from Billy Joe and he doesn't want to fight Canelo and he was always going to find excuses, and if it wasn't this, he would have faked an injury and stuff like that. What I'm going to do here is talk about those sorts of accusations and whether they hold any validity. I'm going to talk about, if he's telling the truth, why he's right to be doing what he's doing. And if he's not telling the truth, what the motive would be for him lying. What I mean by telling the truth is about the verbal agreements that they may have had with regards to all the things that are being portrayed as excuses here. First and foremost, one of the things that he's been accused of is making excuses about things like the judging and the venue and things like that. You guys are all aware of this now. He was told, according to Team Saunders, that there would be a British judge involved, and that there would probably be a British judge, a Mexican judge, and then a neutral judge. And it turns out that that isn't the case. Now, this is a concern, obviously, for Billy Joe, because let's face it, it's becoming a bit of a running joke with Canelo Alvarez and the judging. Now, the other problem he had an issue with Billy Joe was the venue. And we know that Texas is renowned for biased judging. Now, a lot of people have made jokes in more recent times of the development of bad British scorecards. Matchroom scorecards, as a lot of people call them. Now, regardless of where you stand on that, the fact of the matter is, it's been going on in Texas and places like that for a lot longer. Back in the day, you used to hear a lot of people talk about, Germany. You'd have to knock out an opponent in Germany just to get a draw. Well, Texas is one of the most terrible places in terms of reputation. If you don't believe me, just go back and check out Paulie Malignaggi's epic rant after he schooled Diaz and wasn't given a decision. And he had said pre-fight as well that could potentially happen because he'd spoken about one specific judge who he sort of implied was, in Golden Boy's pocket. Now, it's become a running joke in more recent times that Canelo Alvarez starts every fight 4 rounds up. And there always seems to be at least one judge that always has the rounds heavily in favor of Canelo. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that maybe Canelo's just got a very attractive style that translates well. Marcos Villegas, a reporter, was saying yesterday how he believes that's because a lot of judges like aggression. Well, that doesn't explain the first Golovkin fight where he wasn't aggressive at all and he was on the back foot, and it still happened. So there are a lot of fans here who look at this and they say, look, we've had enough of this. What is the point of watching Canelo Alvarez fights? Because although he's a superstar, you've got to knock him out to win the fight. You can't beat him on points. And as a result of that, a lot of people are saying Billy Joe has no chance because he's predominantly a boxer and his best hope is to outbox Canelo. He's not going to knock him out. So what's the point in even watching the fight? So if Billy Joe's concerned about the home advantage given, because Texas is his territory, although he's a Mexican fighter, Texas is his territory. And by the same token, 3 neutral judges, if they're American judges, they're not really neutral at all, are they? Let's face it, the United States and any area that will host a Canelo Alvarez fight is going to benefit hugely in the build-up to any Canelo Alvarez fight. We're talking about economically. Sponsorship comes from outside of that state. You have a lot of people that will visit that state. You're talking about, a booming tourist industry, a whole bunch of stuff. It has a real knock-on effect financially. So Billy Joe is going to feel as though, look, I'm being mistreated here. I'm not going to get the right end of the stick in Texas. Why didn't we have this in another state, for argument's sake? Now, you might say that's unrealistic. But whatever the case might be, he feels as though, look, I'm giving up some advantages here that go beyond what is typical just because I'm fighting an A-side fighter. Now, additionally to that, it was also reported, and again, these are just reports. I have no idea whether they're true or not. Neither I nor you, the wider boxing community, unless you are, someone proper in there with either one of the camps, knows the ins and outs of this particular negotiation. But from what I've read, Billy Joe Saunders had reportedly agreed a fee of $7 million. And that fee was agreed when COVID restrictions were still largely in place in the United States. And as a result, they thought that they could either not have any fans present or up to 15,000 fans. Whereas now they're having up to 70,000 fans. Billy Joe Saunders' argument is, look, you're making a lot more money now from the gate receipts. That should be reflected on me getting more money. Apparently, that hasn't happened. These are the accusations that I've read, the reports that I've read. So he's also thinking, look, I'm leaving money on the table to fight a guy who has home territory in an area, home advantage in an area that has a history of poor judging, against a guy who always seems to have the judges on his side. They promised me a British judge would be there. He's not there. Clearly, my promoter is actually favouring the other guy. Additionally to that, if it's true that they verbally agreed on a specific ring size, then Billy Joe Saunders is looking at this and thinking, look, my best weapon is my movement. If they're looking to make the ring smaller than what was agreed, they're looking to take away my best weapon. So not only does he have all the advantages, they're looking to take away what I'm best at doing too. I'm not standing for this, and I will not fight as a result. Well, what that shows, first and foremost, is that he's not just there for a payday. If he was there for a payday, he'd shut his mouth. He might moan up a little bit, but nothing too major, and he'd take the fight because ultimately, I'm there for the payday. The fact that he's upset at all these things and he's trying to fight them shows that there's a willingness to win, shows that he feels there's an injustice. Now, how realistic is it that these things were all put into some sort of agreement? Well, as far as I'm aware, and please correct me on this, but as far as I'm aware, officially, it's the board of control in that state, the commission of that state, the boxing commission of that state, that dictates or decides not just who the judges are, but what the ring size is. And so it doesn't typically go into a contract. So a lot of people have said, well, is it even in the contract? Apparently that's not typical. But because Billy Joe Saunders has Eddie Hearn as his promoter, and yes, Eddie Hearn is also Canelo's promoter, although Canelo might be the preferred option in terms of victory for Eddie because he's a superstar and it would mean more money for Matchroom, at the very least, Billy Joe Saunders might be in a position where he thinks, look, if my promoter's made me this promise, he's not going to renege on that. He might be wanting Canelo to win the fight, but, they're not going to renege on this. So I find that interesting, okay? Additionally to that, it could just be a financial thing here where he's thinking, look, they didn't give me the more money that I needed, so now I'm going to pretend that I'm going to walk away from the fight because I deserve the more money. They didn't give it to me when that gate came in, so now I just want that extra money. So it could just be a bluff here. It could be mind games whereby he's making Canelo Alvarez stress. Is this fight not going to happen? What's this going to mean for the brand? They're talking about flying over John Ryder. Now, John Ryder is a guy who I'm a big fan of. I was there very early live, ringside, at one of John Ryder's fights. And I came on one of the videos I made and I was talking about John Ryder. And I said, listen, this is a guy that's going to reach world level. He's one to watch in the future. And he has indeed gone on to world level. In fact, I felt beat Callum Smith. So he should have been a super middleweight champ as far as I was concerned. So I'm a fan of his, right? And I have been for a long time. But if you're taking a fight on such short notice, you're going to fly in as a late replacement, you have no chance of winning the fight. You are there for a paycheck. Well, Billy Joe Saunders, to be upset about all these things, doesn't appear to be there for a paycheck, but he's still a prize fighter. And money is going to be one of the motivations. So maybe he's kicking up a fuss in the hope that they can give him an extra $1 million just to tell him to shut up, right, and get on with it and have a fight. That could be the motivation here. It might be a principle thing too. Or, like I said, a mind game, getting Canelo's mind. You're not going to get it your own way. Just like when Vladimir Klitschko was going to fight Tyson Fury, and Fury kept saying, and David Hay had said this prior to that, by the way, you're not always going to get your own way, Vlad. You don't control me. You're not going to get your own way. And when Vladimir Klitschko tried to introduce a very spongy canvas, they put like 2 layers, was it, of really thick sponge, whereby guys would step into the ring and their feet would sink deep into the ring to affect movement. They threatened to walk away, just like Billy Joe's threatening to walk away. Now, let me say this. A lot of people are sitting there going, oh, Billy's making excuses. He just doesn't want to fight. He wants to duck and blah, blah, blah. He's going to lose anyway. What does it matter? If Tyson Fury didn't put his foot down and Team Fury didn't threaten to leave Dusseldorf without fighting Klitschko, leaving the whole thing up in the air, if that had happened, didn't happen rather, and they fought on those double sponged canvases, and Tyson Fury couldn't move, and he got knocked out. It became a fight in the pocket. It affected his balance. He was getting caught. He couldn't move. He couldn't use his best weapons. He gets knocked out. Then he comes out and he says publicly, you know what happened? They messed with the ring. I couldn't move properly around the ring. It affected my mobility. He caught me. What would you as in the wider boxing community, I'm not talking about my specific subscribers here, but the wider boxing community, what would they have said about Tyson Fury? Stop making excuses. This is the same as David Haye and Toegate. You'd have seen memes about Fury. They would have been mocking him. You know what I mean? Tyson Fury is undefeated and people still mock him about the uppercut where he uppercutted himself in the face all these years later. Okay, so imagine what would have happened to him if he'd lost that fight because they refused to threaten to walk away. So when you have a genuine willingness to win and you believe you can win, the sheer principle of these things might make you turn around and say, you know what, I'm walking away. Now, in terms of the ring size, 20 feet is not unreasonable. It's a standard Olympic size ring. From what I've understood in Britain, 20 feet is actually what is the typical ring size. So Billy Joe, you know, is asking for something that's potentially unreasonable here. But if it was agreed beforehand, why wouldn't he try and insist that he gets it when he hasn't had any other advantages go his way? Wasn't it unreasonable when Floyd Mayweather asked Canelo Alvarez not to come in at 154 and to come in at 152 and a half or whatever it was? Wasn't it unreasonable when Canelo used to ask middleweights to fight below the middleweight division, middleweight limit for the middleweight title? Okay, Billy Joe Saunders is not willing to put up with these things. So why does that make him the bad guy? Or why does that make him afraid? No, what it does is it makes him a guy who feels like he's made certain agreements behind the scenes and he's not willing to lament on those principles, to give up and to say, listen, I want to win this fight. And if I give him all these little advantages in a fight where it will be decided on the details, I will not achieve my dreams and I'm not willing to let that go for a paycheck. So no, fix up. We agreed these things. They're coming into force. Now, Canelo Alvarez, for the sport of boxing, is great because he's a superstar. He's a megastar. This idea that Billy Joe Saunders would somehow duck this opportunity because he's afraid, to me, is stupid. Okay? You're talking about the biggest payday of his career. You're talking about a guy who has not transcended the British borders in terms of his name. You know, even in the UK, he's not a household name, but, you know, British fight fans know him and rate him highly. But you're not talking about a guy here who's a household name, who's on TV shows like Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury, or Ricky Hatton, you know, Frank Bruno. That's not who he is. So let's say he was to lose this fight. Is it really going to affect his stock internationally? Of course not. So he doesn't have that to lose, especially if he gives a good account of himself. If he boxes really well and loses a legitimate close decision or even an illegitimate close decision, his stock's going to rise in the eyes of American fight fans. They're going to say, listen, man, he's the real deal. Just like the Mayweather gym was sitting there talking about him highly and going, that boy can really box after he schooled David Lemieux. People have forgotten that. People have short memories. And to be fair, since then, he's put in some performances that have been less than inspiring. And people have forgotten that. But imagine he put in that sort of performance, even if he lost, against Canelo Alvarez now, right? Against Canelo, a superstar. He's only going to become a much bigger brand. He's obviously going to make, like I said, his biggest career payday and he'll be making a lot more money in the future. And he has the chance to become a megastar and unify the division, a superstar. What is there to duck? What, he's afraid of being punched by Canelo Alvarez? Is that what you honestly believe? A guy who's been boxing ever since he was a child, who since the age of 14 or 13, whatever it was, he's only ever lost one fight in the amateurs in the Olympic Games. And since then and before then, he hadn't lost apparently from the age of 14, 13, 14. Come on, man. These people aren't afraid of being punched in the face. This is what they do for a living. In the same way that if you work at a telephone center and your job is to answer the phone every day and you answer it 100 times a day, you're not going to be nervous talking on the phone like you get some people that are, right? He does it for a living. He's not afraid of Canelo from a physical perspective. And because he's not the A side, he's not afraid of losing any specific advantages either. So I just don't buy that. And while Canelo is incredible for the sport from a financial perspective, I'm going to ask this question. Is Canelo Alvarez good for the sport when it comes to, you know, from the fans' perspective? Because we've just seen something that happened in football, the sport of football, soccer, as our American friends call it, here in Europe, whereby the major clubs, the elite clubs, financially speaking, not in terms of history or success, but financially speaking, sought to break away and create a European Super League whereby these 8 teams would have been competing among themselves. Nobody else would have been competing. You couldn't get promoted or relegated. They took away competition from the tournament to guarantee a magnification of the income they make. They were going to make it into a franchise thing. Now, some American fans might not understand that because understand what the opposition to this was, because you do have franchise sports teams in the United States. Here in Europe, it's all about relegation and promotion. It's all about that dream that absolutely any team can start from the bottom tier of football. You can get your friends together. If you pay the licensing fees and you create a football team, in theory, you could go and become the biggest team in the world if you keep getting promotions, okay? That opportunity to continually progress and to win anything is what makes the sport special to fans. My point is, for years, the Champions League and the emergence of the Premier League away from the old First Division was portrayed as fantastic for football. But it was fantastic for football from a financial perspective where, you know, maybe a small amount of people particularly benefited. But from the perspective of the fans, has it really been what's best for football? And you have to start. And so what I'm asking you guys is, does that sort of thing apply to Canelo Alvarez? Is Canelo Alvarez good for the sport when we're sitting here and we're talking about a massive fight potentially and all the little advantages are going to the A side? And these things happen before Canelo, by the way. I've already spoken about Klitschko, but they're happening a lot in the sport. Is it a bad thing is he bad for the sport when we're sitting here talking about potential fights and some of us are saying, Billy Joe can't win this fight. You know why he can't win this fight? Because the only way he could win this fight is if he wins by knockout. And because he can't knock Canelo out, there's no way he's getting a decision. Isn't that terrible for the sport from a fan's perspective? Let me know what you think about all this. And I'm not questioning Canelo Alvarez's ability. I'm going to do a proper breakdown video this week. I'm just talking about this whole situation in general and why some of the criticism Billy Joe Saunders is getting, in my opinion, is harsh. I kind of understand where he's coming from. If he is lying and making this stuff up, it could be mind games. It could be because of the financial element where he wasn't rewarded in a manner that he felt was fair when that gate receipt then increased. This might be his way of saying, listen, I'm going to walk away, and then they're going to essentially bribe him to stay on. Let me know what you think. What is the aim of Billy Joe? Please don't tell me he's afraid. Unless you're going to make a proper strong case for it, I can't accept the idea that he's afraid of fighting another man. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.